When this decade began, it would have been difficult to find 100 people who had ever heard the name Elton John. Yet today, 6 years later, Elton John stands alone at the very top of superstardom. Fact. 2 of his last 3 albums, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy and Rock of the Westies, entered the best-selling album charts at number 1, something no other recording artist had ever accomplished. Fact. Elton John has made more money and sold more records in 1 year, 1975, than any recording artist in history. Fact. He sold out 6 nights in New York's Madison Square Garden this month. That's more than 120,000 people. No one has ever done that before. Just who is this man that in so short a time has captured the imagination of so many millions of us? To find out, we went to see Elton John a few weeks ago at his New York hotel suite. He met us in a long, flowing red dressing gown with the now famous initials EJ monogrammed in white. During the 2 hours we spent with him, he was friendly and open and candid in his responses to our questions. If anything, the man whose extroverted ways are legendary seemed a bit shy and reserved. As our talk began, the subject of his current sellout tour was the first thing on our mind. How do the tours come about? Is it something that you do every 2 years or whenever the spirit moves you, or you just sit around one day and you decide, I'd like to get on stage again, let's get a tour together? I mean, how does that begin? Well,
in America they usually worked out in about a year in advance because they have to be. I mean, you just can't say, I'm going to tour America and just suddenly whip over it because there are visas and things like that and buildings to get. We were planning this tour of the East Coast last year because we did the West Coast. And more or less it was decided that this was going to be like the last tour for quite some time because recently anyway, because I've just had enough of going on the road for the moment, and I just want to sort of relax and do other things which I don't have the time to do if I'm still sort of running around the world. So but this tour, this East Coast tour that we're doing now, is more or less planned last year because I couldn't afford, just no way I could have done a whole tour of America last year.
It's on the one hand, I guess it's extremely grueling, and I think you've also been quoted somewhere, I read somewhere, where it's the most fun for you, getting on stage.
Yeah,
it's like nothing else.
Still is, but I'm sort of getting to the point now where I have a feeling that if I carried on much longer, it wouldn't be the most fun for me on stage. It would just be sort of, I don't know, just beginning to get like a bit of a sort of robot machine type thing, which I never wanted it to be. So I just have an instinct gut feeling like I did when I changed the band, and I'm just going to come off the road for a time. I really need it. So after 6 years, you really do need to stop and sort of gather yourself and do a little bit of other things, other interests.
You have anything particular in mind? Things that'll interest you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sort of say, hey, I'm not going to do any music anymore. I'm going to produce Kiki in September. And I've got my soccer club, which I'm chairman of, which I'll be taking a lot of time over next year because I sort of, being a chairman, you do have to sort of sit down and run things, and you just can't sort of hop off month after month. You have to be there when things are going on. And I was looking forward to that a lot.
Can we go back to the beginning for maybe just spend a couple of minutes covering life before Elton John became a household name, when Elton John was not even Elton John. It starts in England, in Pinner, Middlesex. And just again, if you could kind of recap, Elton, for people who don't know how you got into music, how that came about, the story of the piano and your mother and some records. And it began, I think, when you started just teaching yourself to play piano at a really young age?
Yeah, when I was about 4. I just had a piano in the house, and I taught myself. I think was persuaded to have lessons about that when I was about 7 or 8. And I hated having lessons, but and I was sort of forced to go to the Royal Academy of Music. I sort of went there every Saturday after going to school Mondays to Fridays.
Was it the standard kind of lesson? No,
I mean it was quite good by then. No, you win a scholarship if you're any good. And I took there's 8 grades you can take in music in England, and I passed my grade 8, and I used to go to the academy and study. And I used to play truant. I just didn't enjoy it very much at the time. I'm grateful for it now because it did help me. I can see that actually going to all those sort of classes and studying chord structures and things like that did sort of help out in the end, which I didn't think they would be doing when I was doing it. All I wanted to do was go to a soccer match on a Saturday. But it was useful, and I used to like singing in the choir. But as far as actually doing it, I was sort of as a pain in the arse, really, going to the academy on a Saturday when I should have been able to go It was like my free day because Sunday was homework. So I realised I just had a seven-day schedule, which I resented.
When did you first maybe have that flash about liking music enough to do it as a career?
Always. That's all I ever wanted to do, you know. But I was... the Academy came at the time of rock and roll, and I was more interested in Jerry Lee Lewis and Fats Domino and people like that than actually playing Chopin. It wasn't exactly my cup of tea.
And what side of this musical fence were your parents on? They were obviously trying to push you in the Chopin's direction.
No, my father was probably. My mother didn't really mind. She, in fact, bought the first Elvis Presley record and Bill Haley and the Comets and all that. So my mother was pretty hip. My father could never be hip if he went, you know, no way. If he went through 25 courses of EST, he'd never be hip.
Your parents, what do they think? Did you have a chance to get feedback from them on what's happened to you?
Oh, well, my parents divorced. My father and mother divorced when I was about 14. So I have a stepfather now. And a stepmother. No, I don't have a stepmother. But my dad remarried him. I think my dad was always a sort of snob, so he would have preferred me to have been in the Air Force. I still, even now, you know. Even now, this... Yeah, I think it's a bit sort of demeaning for him to have somebody who's sort of playing piano in rock and roll. My mother's, you know, she's fine. She doesn't mind at all. She's thrilled. But my real father, I don't think, you know, would prefer me to have worked in a bank or something like that. Something, you know, really respectable and boring, like he is.
When your mother brought home those... where does he live? Where was he
I don't know, and I don't care. He used to live in Liverpool, but I just... he just made a statement in the press that he's got a 6-year-old son that can play piano better than I can now, so... The world awaits another Elton John. Shriek, God, horror. I just feel sorry for those 4 kids he's got. He remarried and has 4 kids, and...
So there'll be half brothers and sisters of yours?
Yeah, they'll all end up in the Air Force. They'll be piano-playing bank clerks, you see.
That Bill Haley and the Comets record and the Elvis Presley record that your mom brought home, had you heard those records on the radio and known them, or was it a totally fresh experience when you put the record down on the turntable?
No, well, my mum used to go and buy a couple of records a week, so she just used to pop into the local record store. And I'd never heard of Elvis Presley or Bill Haley at that time. And I remember when she brought them home, I was so knocked out with them, I couldn't believe it. And it was just like, after listening to Guy Mitchell and people like that, this was a totally new sort of music. And then after she brought the record home, I went and had my hair cut in the barber shop, and I saw an article in Life, I think, on Elvis Presley, and it sort of the pictures I couldn't imagine. You know, the pictures were amazing. I couldn't believe it.
Which Elvis record was it?
It was Heartbreak Hotel, and the Bill Haley record was ABC Boogie. The American singers were very, very popular. In fact, it was like English singers always used to make sort of cover records of American records. You know?
Joe Stafford.
Yeah, all those people. K-Star.
Kitty Callan.
Yes, little things mean a lot. There you go.
On the classical side of it, since you were also involved there, do you have some favorite pieces of classical music? Or is it something you've totally disregarded?
Oh, no, I haven't disregarded. I appreciate it. I probably like it much more now than I did then. In fact, I must do, because I hated it then, because I was forced to play it. I prefer sort of lyrical... I like Vaughan Williams, and I like Sibelius and Dvorak and things like that. And also... It depends if I'm in the mood. I can sort of listen to things like Penderecki, and I really like those too. But you have to really concentrate on those sort of things. But I like really lyrical symphonic works, and Chopin's pretty too. But I'm not. It depends what mood you're in. I think you have to be in a really good mood to listen to classical music, because you just can't sort of do the housework and listen to it. You really have to sit down and appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Does classical music? Does it involve part of your famous record collection?
Oh yeah. I don't think I've got that many classical records. I'm sort of only beginning to appreciate it now, I think. For example, in Barbados, we used to sit on the beach and listen to Vaughan Williams, and it was incredible. And those are the sort of situations that I think you have to listen to classical music in. You have to, as I say, you just can't sort of dash around the house listening to bits and pieces of it. You just really have to, if someone's written a work, then you should sort of listen to it. It's like Keith Jarrett. You just can't sort of sit down and say, like, well, I'm just going to listen to a bit of this and then off I go. You have to listen to the whole album. Those sort of albums are the ones you end up by playing mostly, I think. You know? Yeah. It's really nice to actually sit down and listen to those sort of things.
There's certainly a lot of feeling in especially the Elton John album, the black-covered album, of, I guess, that kind of training that you've had.
Yeah, they're classical influence songs. I think you can tell things like 60 Years On and Greatest Discovery.
And the first episode of High End.
Yeah, and they're sort of songs that I think the chord structures, you can say, are pretty classically orientated. There have been lots scattered throughout most of the albums. I tend to write a lot of songs like that.
Mm-hmm. Can you ever see yourself performing on piano with instrumentally with an orchestra? Would that be something that you might get off on?
I tried it a couple of times. It was murder. Because most string players in England, all they care about, they come in and they rehearse and then they read their newspapers and they drink their coffee and then they pick up the violin again and then they just don't want to know. You know, it's really a harrowing experience. I've done it twice. Once with session musicians and once with the London Philharmonic, I think. And both experiences I wouldn't want to go through again.
Let's get back to your growth into music and when you first started to play in a band, which was when you were about 14, I think.
Yeah, just some local lads, some friends of mine. We just had a 10-watt amplifier, and we used to go through that. Mostly playing Jerry Lee Lewis things and Elvis Presley things, all American. I mean, there was no English music scene at that time whatsoever. It was all American records, and the English people that were playing were just copying American records note for note. So, I mean, we just used to listen to American records and copy them note for note, and then go out and try and play them. We had fun. I mean, it was like those were the innocent days. Sometimes they're the best. When you just there were no worries about money or anything like that. We just used to go and meet in one of our houses. I think we used to take it in turns, and we used to play it. It was lovely.
When did your legendary meeting with Long John Baldry come about? That was a big turning point in your career, wasn't it?
Not in my career, I would say, but I mean, I learned a lot when I played with John. I mean, in the end, it was a big turning point because it made me get out of doing it, what I was doing. We've been playing as a band professionally and backing all these American singers like Doris Troy and Patti LaBelle on the bells, and Major Lance and people like that. And we were getting like $25 a week each for it, and working hard and not really complaining, travelling up and down, doing sometimes like 3 gigs a day. And it was just learning, and at the time, as I say, it was really fun. But it got to us after a while, and we didn't want to be a backing group the rest of our lives, so we decided to go solo, which we didn't do very well at. We went to Hamburg and did the usual thing over there, and we went to the south of France, and we played all the sort of inn clubs in London at the time, like the Cromwellian and the Scotch of St James and the Marquee, as a support band, never headlining. I used to support Manfred Mann and people like that, Spencer Davis. And then Baldry came along just after the Steam Packet broke up and suggested that he wanted to put this sort of review on the road featuring our singer Stuart, another singer called Alan Walker.
Well, you didn't play Stuart. You didn't sing in those bands.
No, I was never singing in those days. No, I was just playing very bad Vox Continental organ. No, I didn't sing.
One last question about John Baldry. Is he the someone in Someone Saved My Life Tonight? Was that?
Oh yes, that's him.
That was about John.
Yeah. Well, I was going to get married. Mm-hmm. I had about 3 weeks to go. I had the furniture bought. I had everything ready. And the only reason I was getting married because she said she was pregnant, and I was doing the honourable gentleman bit. And I didn't really want to get married because she hated anything I ever wrote. She sort of hated, and her favourite record was "Girl Talk" by Buddy Greco, and she wouldn't listen to Nina Simone records and things like that. So I went out with him one night. I got absolutely paralytically drunk for about the first time in my life, I think. And Baldry said, "Listen, you're mad. You don't want to get married. I mean, you're going to ruin your life if you sort of get married to someone that you don't really want. It's just not fair on both of you." So I didn't, and she wasn't pregnant anyway. And I got sued for breach of promise, but who cares? I won.
You won the suit?
Yeah, well, she wasn't pregnant.
And you really think if you and John hadn't gone out that night, your life might have taken a whole different turn?
Completely, yeah. I was quite prepared to get married. And I think it would have been a disaster because, as I say, she was very anti-music. John is great to work for. I mean, whenever I see him, I still feel like his piano player. In fact, he still treats me like his piano player. But that eventually, I got to get out of this. I don't care what I do, but I just cannot play in these cabaret places. So while I was in the band, and at one point Caleb Quay was in the band as well, playing guitar, because I'd known Caleb for a long, long time, and I decided to look around for something to do. And the only thing I thought I could do was songwriting, and I'd never tried that really. Only a couple of abortive efforts, which I never really played anybody.
And you did at this point. You still didn't have any idea that you could be a singer. Is that right?
No, I didn't want to be a singer. I just wanted to thought, well, there seems to be a lucrative thing in songwriting, i.e. Bacharach and David and Coffin and King. So I didn't want to write lyrics, so I just answered this advert in the NME for Liberty Records, which now is United Artists, and sort of got together with Bernie, this guy called Ray Williams, said, well, this guy sent me lyrics, see what you think of them. And I suppose it was about 6 months before I actually got to meet Bernie, but I'd written a lot of music to those lyrics. And that was very flower power at the time, you know. It was very beads and bells and joss sticks time. Mm-hmm. And the lyrics, I mean, I've heard some of the old demos, and I cannot believe them. I just cannot believe it. I thought, I mean, I was so snobbish at the time. I thought these lyrics were so good they were above everybody else's. And when we look back and hear them, we just sat there the other day and cringed. It was very much the watercolour Mansions of Your Mind period for us. Anyway, we eventually secured a songwriting contract. Originally, we were signed to Gralto Music, which I don't think many people know, which is the Hollies, Graham, Allen and Tony. We were signed to the Hollies, first of all, and then they didn't really sort of realise that we'd signed for them, and eventually Dick James signed us and said, listen, I'll give you 10 quid a week, and you write songs for Engelbert Humperdinck. And that is exactly what we did, and that's the point that I left Baldry's Band. When I knew I had a secure sort of like income coming in, even though it was only a small amount, I just sort of gave him my notice because I just couldn't stand it any longer.
Once you and Bernie started working together, did a relationship form between the two of you? In other words, what I'm getting at is, are you two really great friends, aside from obviously being very compatible as far as music and lyrics are concerned? Do you two see a lot of each other? Is he a friend? Is he a confidant?
It used to be. This sounds like it used to be much more than he is now. What a thing to say! But we used to sort of both live at my parents' apartment. So in the early days, we were much closer because we had nothing else to do. But once I actually started touring and things like that, which Bernie doesn't like really touring, we see less of each other. And I still see him quite a bit. But there's no way that we're as close now as we were. I mean, I still look at him as sort of like a brother. I always sort of regard him as like a brother figure. But we have lost contact with each other a bit, just because this sort of touring hectic thing has just forced us apart, really, because he doesn't like to do it. You can't expect him to go on tour. It's really boring, very frustrating just to sit there night after night and watch somebody do something. And he's working on some things of his own now. He's getting a little bit of recognition on his own. He's working on the Captain Fantastic cartoon film, and he's got his book out, and I still feel very close to him, but there's no way. I mean, it's just like we used to just be with each other all the time, so there's no way we could be as close now as we were then.
It's probably also difficult for somebody to be with somebody else a lot of the time when so much focus is placed on the other person.
It's always very sad, because I mean, without Bernie starts the whole thing off, you know. I mean, without Bernie's lyrics, there would be no music, there would be no touring, there would be nothing. And it's like he was on the Mike Douglas show yesterday, and he went on to talk about his book, and then all the questions were like, well, what's Elton really like? What's he doing now? And it's sort of, you know, it's a drag, because he's always got this thing hanging around his neck that he's just sort of like a cog in a wheel, whereas the wheel would never turn if it wasn't for him. And it's very sad, and it's something that I think he gets generally heard about, you know.
You never collaborated with anybody else other than Bernie Taupin?
No, and that was it. I mean, I'm writing more with other people now, but definitely not. I mean, I would never consider writing with anybody else sort of permanently. I mean, Bernie and I can see Bernie and I going on forever, but I'm always encouraging him to write lyrics with other people or for other people, because I think it would be a good thing for him to do.
Now, when you get the lyrics from Bernie, I know that's the way the records usually come into fruition, is you get the lyrics from Bernie and then you start and work it out into music. Is it ever necessary? Do you ever make kind of like a lyric change, or as it's being put to music, to create a musical phrase or an idea?
Yeah, I think you have to with his lyrics. For A, he can't spell. B, I mean, the original lyric things. He's learned a lot since, but I mean, the original lyrics were just written line after line with no verse or anything. So I used to have to sort of chop them up into verses, and each line was a different length. There was no sort of iambic pentameter, I think is the phrase they say. I always alter all, you know. I mean, he doesn't write yeah, and Benny. I mean, he doesn't sort of repeat things. I just have to do things like that. He's gotten a lot better as far as it's making it easier. But in the old days, it used to be more or less impossible. I mean, for example, a song like first episode of Elton was really just like a poem. Really, it wasn't like a song. It was just written in with line after line. I thought, oh, what the hell am I going to do with this? But it always seems to work out for some reason.
What happens? Does an envelope show up in the mail one day, and inside is a scribbled piece of paper?
No, that's only occurred during the last couple of years, because, as I say, we've sort of grown apart, and I'm always at one place and he's the other. I mean, he always turns up at recording sessions at the end, because he doesn't like to sit through the whole 6 weeks of doing it. But it started at the chateau with the factory process, as I call it, with him writing the lyrics upstairs, Maxine typing them out and bringing them down to me on the piano, and songs would get written like that.
While the sessions are going on?
Yeah, I was sort of my Motown period. But it more or less, it's got to the point now where I sort of suggest a couple of titles and a couple of lines, and we work that way, which has never happened before. Like, Don't Go Breaking My Heart, I came up with the title, and I should say probably 30 or 40% of the lyrics. And there's a couple of other things on the album, on the album that's going to come out when, I don't know, but that has a couple of 2 or 3 of my ideas, and I have to phone him up and say, listen, I've got this song called this, and it's very hard for him to do it, but he does it. He always comes up with the goods. There's one song on the new album called Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word, which, again, is about 40% of my lyrics. But we're collaborating like that, more like that now.
But you say in the old days, occasionally one did just kind of show up. Bernie got an idea and sat down and scribbled out some song and just mail it out to you or something?
No, because we were always living together.
Oh,
I mean, we sort of lived together for about 4 or 5 years before, or 3 or 4 years before he eventually got married, and then success started. Once we came over here and we were successful, that more or less sort of shoved us apart, really, because there was no way we could stay together.
How about the kind of arrangements and orchestrations of a song? I've always felt that a pop record, there was really 3 main parts. There's the music and the lyrics, and then equally important is the way the record is arranged, how it hooks, how strings come in, how overdubs are used, and all of that. Is that basically something that you create when you while you're writing the song? Do you also write the sound of the song?
Yeah, I think when you write a song, you envisage how you want it to sound. Very rarely do they ever come out on record how you really want them to sound. It's just something happens. Something always gets a little twisted, and they never usually come out exactly how you first envisaged them. When we made, I'm dismissing the Empty Sky album for a minute because that wasn't so much an arranged album, but the Elton John album, for example, was everything. We sat down and planned it, and it was all arranged and more or less written note for note. So I knew more or less what was going to come out at the end, except I didn't know what the string arrangements were going to be like. But that was all done live, strings, piano, a lot, because we had a budget, and in those days it was a very big budget for someone who didn't sell a record. So we just did that all live within 1 week. And that was one of the most harrowing experiences of my life, just because I was sitting there going through that lot. I mean, playing with string players was sort of like, could read straight off, and I was sitting there hoping not to make a mistake. And we didn't overdub in those days because we just couldn't afford to. So, but when you do write a song, especially now, I mean, you can afford to sit back and put a very basic rhythm track and then build on it bit by bit, which we didn't have the luxury of doing in sort of like the Elton John Tumbleweed Empty Sky days. We just, actually up to the Madman Across the Water, we still had to worry about budgets and things like that.
So in a record like, let's say for instance, Island Girl, and then there's something where the music stops and and the guitars kind of go,
yeah.
Then you kind of hear that when you're creating the song.
Oh, I don't think you can hear that. I mean, those sort of little things like that happen when you actually make the record, and it's not. Sometimes it's not my suggestion even. I mean, within this sort of band that we've got now, and even with the old band, the musicians in the studio would come up with ideas which were really good. They're not just my ideas. I think it's just the people who played on them.
You haven't produced any of your own albums at all?
No.
Do you think it's a good idea for an artist to produce himself on records?
It depends on the artist. Sometimes it's good for them, sometimes it's bad. I would like to produce myself eventually and do something, because every artist does want to have a go. There's a very big danger of getting very self-indulgent, which I think has happened to a lot of artists who just sort of thrived with a good producer, and then when they've shoved them out and then started producing themselves, you can see the little inadequacies popping up here and there, which you can get into. You can get very self-indulgent. I think some people handle it very well. I think Joni handles it very well, and Jackson Browne and people like that. I think they more or less produce their own records. But I think, on the whole, I think you do have to have someone to sort of go against you, even if it's just for argument's sake.
Take the long look at it and step back from it.
Perhaps you should do this instead of that. I mean, in the end, I've got 99% of control of what goes on. If I don't like a mix or I don't like something on a record, then it's always done again. except in the early days when, as I say, we didn't have any choice.
Speaking of the early days, can you remember the very first time you were in a recording session to work professionally making a record?
Yeah, I made a single called I've Been Loving You, which came out on Philips in England, and I made that at Dick James Studio in Oxford Street. It was 4-track. It was pretty exciting. I mean, we made records as Bluesology, but I'm discounting that because I just can't even remember those sessions.
Were they released, Bluesology?
Oh,
records?
absolutely. 2 records on Fontana. One was called, which I wrote, actually, and sang.
All right.
I can't believe it. I mean, when I look back, I thought, well, how come I ended up by singing them? Because I never used to sing in the band whatsoever, but I did. One was called Come Back Baby, which is dreadful. And the other one's called Mr. Frantic, which is probably the worst record ever made. And there was a record on Polydor, which I played on Bluesology, but written by an English guy called Kenny Lynch. And Stuart Brown sang the lead on that. But I could never figure out why I sang on those first 2 records, because, as I say, I never used to sing.
Well, when did you finally realize, hey, I could sing?
Well, I got pushed into it, you see. The songwriting thing didn't work out as far as writing songs for other people goes, because, I mean, nobody recorded any of our songs, so the proof of the pudding was in the eating. We just weren't very good at it. And when Steve Brown sort of joined Dick James Music and said, listen, what you're doing is basically absolute rubbish, which we knew, but when someone tells you, it really hurts, you know. Why don't you start doing things that you really want to? Well, we did write other songs apart from that, but we never played them to anybody. And we started writing things like Skyline Pigeon and things like that, and I had to sing them. There was no one else singing them, and they were sort of very personal songs. They were songs I was pleased with, so I didn't want anybody else to sing them except me. And that sort of started when I thought, oh, perhaps I might, like to make records as a singer. I never realised that it would get to this proportion. I mean, I just wanted to be a composer. I never ever wanted to go out on the road again. How that ever happened was so ridiculous.
The idea of getting up and performing and singing in front of large audiences at that time, there was a kind of a frightening notion.
It wasn't even a notion. I didn't really have any idea about doing it. I made the Empty Sky album. I made a couple of singles, Lady Samantha, I've Been Loving You. And then I made the Elton John album, which was a lot of money, as I said, for an unknown artist to be spending on £5,000 that album cost, which was unheard of. Albums were only just beginning to start catching on. And that didn't sell either when it came out, even though it was hailed as a really great album by the press and the disc jockeys and people like that, the radio people. It didn't sell. And it's always been the case in England. The groups only make it if you go out on the road and are prepared to put in all the groundwork. And then your records will start selling because you get a following. It's sort of like, it's the same everywhere. If a group works hard enough, eventually they'll start to sell records, i.e. Aerosmith, Kiss, example. So that's what I had to do. I had to be persuaded to go out on the road, which I just fought tooth and nail against. I didn't want ever to do it. And it was so difficult in those days because nobody knew anything about amplifying pianos. I played on upright pianos. But it was different. People liked it because it was just piano, bass and drums. And it wasn't Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but it was... I don't know, it was pretty peculiar because it was, as I say, really hard to get a good piano or even mica piano in those days. We had no idea, we were so naive.
I think that's about where I first started to hear about you. Is I was working, doing a show for the ABC FM syndicated network, and this is 1970 now, and got a hold of the Empty Sky album and the Elton John album, which were not yet released in the United States.
Right, we couldn't find anybody to put them out.
Right, and I don't think anybody was playing the records, and we heard them at ABC and loved them and started to play them a lot and got enormous feedback on it. And people who were listening to the ABC FM stations in New York, it was WABC FM, started to ask for them a lot. And that was just about the time that you came over for your first visit to the United States.
Yeah, and I didn't even want to come to that either. See, everything's worked out. Good evening. So eventually I thought, oh, all right, I go. I really just wanted to go to a record shop. That was all. I didn't really. I thought, oh, we're going. I had no idea what was going to happen, and it all happened because of that silliness at the Troubadour.
August 1970.
Yeah.
How many nights did you play the Troubadour during that famous time when the place where you so-called happened?
5, I think. Two shows. I think there was 2 shows on weekdays and 3 at the weekend.
And then it built as the 5 days progressed until towards the end of the 5 days. It was crazy.
The first day was. I mean, I can remember the first day and the second day probably just full of press and business people because the word was out and I couldn't believe it. It was just full of all those sort of people. I think very few street people actually came and saw us at those gigs. It was like the industry were just scrambling over themselves to get tickets. So I always count my first American gig as Philadelphia's Electric Factory, where there was just playing to people. But it was totally ludicrous because I was playing second on the bill, at the top of the bill rather, over David Eccles, who in England was really like quite well known. I mean, he could have sold out a lot of places in England. He had success because Julie Driscoll had done Road to Cairo, and Downriver was a big record, and he really sort of, Bernie and I idolised him. We came over to the Troubadour, and there we were playing above him. We couldn't believe it.
And it turned out to be the Elton John show rather than the David Eccles show in people's minds.
That totally amazed me, first of all. And it was really fun playing with David Eccles because he's such a nice person anyway. And he was, that was a thrill for me just to be playing with David Eccles. So when all the rest of it started, and I didn't shake a million hands in Hollywood time, I was so bewildered by it all, I couldn't believe it. I think it was very good for me to sort of happen like that, because in the end I saw so many bullshit artists come through the door, with their families and things. I just thought, well, this is ridiculous,
All of a sudden everybody wanted to know you.
One minute I'm nothing, and then this minute everybody was like falling over themselves to get to know me. So I sort of, that's probably a good thing that happened like that, because otherwise I think it could have been a bit dangerous. But I immediately left America thinking, oh God, I've got to beware of all these people going to latch onto me, which several people did want to become my manager and threatened to follow me around the country. I could name names, but I won't, until I signed management contracts with them. It was all that bit, and I think I was so caught off guard that I sort of went into my shell and thought, I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm just going to sort out the good people from the bad.
You think you've been successful in doing that?
Yeah, I think so. It's very hard, but I've always had pretty good people around me, and yeah, I think it's been successful.
Well, if the Troubadour in August of '70 was the big West Coast event that made a lot of people aware of Elton John, I think it was a double-barrel thing that happened here in New York a few months later, and one was, I think, the WABC FM live broadcast, which was followed, I think, only a few days later by your appearance at the Fillmore with McKendry Spring and Leon Russell.
Right, yeah.
And by the time that was all over, which I think all happened within a week, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, probably. Things were happening so fast in those days. I remember doing 8 interviews in one day. I still think we're doing that now. Things did happen fast. I think that's correct. I remember playing the Fillmore. And I remember doing the radio broadcast very well.
I remember following the radio broadcast. We all came back to the station, you and Nigel and Dee and some of us who
Mary Travers.
Mary Travers, right? And we were in a little room there listening to the playback of the tapes. And my remembering that evening was that you were very high and very exalted at the way you actually played that night. I remember you saying things like, "I've never played piano like that."
Well, it's because we wore headphones. If you remember, everybody wore headphones, like doing a recording session actually, and playing to 100 people. Everyone could actually hear what everyone else was doing, which is a great problem on stage. You can never actually hear 100% of what everybody else is doing. But if you wear headphones, that's why Nigel, after that's what made him wear headphones all the time, because it was so crystal clear, and so you played better.
You release and make a lot of records, all of enormously fine quality, all of which sell. You probably release more music than anybody that I can think of. Do you think is there a danger in doing that, in putting out so much music?
Well, in those days we didn't really, it was a shame because as the Elton John album didn't come out in America until it had been out in England for like 7 or 8 months.
Right.
And by which time Tumbleweed was more or less out anyway. So by the time the Elton John album had got acceptance, they had to release Tumbleweed pretty quickly after it because they were importing it. And then that started off the grand old an Elton John album a month competition. We'd already signed previously to come into the States to do the Friends soundtrack, so we did that, and that Paramount released 1 million copies on one day and got 900,000 back the next. My first, I call it my bootleg gold album.
Right. Which brings us around to the subject of Elton John rumors. Let's see, what are some of the latest ones that I've heard?
All right.
Oh, just last week, a friend of mine said, "Is it true Elton John tried to commit suicide?" And there are various others. I guess there's always one of the week. Do you have any favorites? Any favorite Elton John rumors?
There was plenty when I was in Canada. My hair transplant room was the best. Yeah. I mean, waking up and seeing the Toronto Star and reading that I just had a hair transplant and that my scalp was still bleeding. That was wonderful. And that went across the whole world. That was just on the wires, and everyone keeps coming up saying, "Well, don't you, they made a very good job, And I never had it done. I'm always rumours that I bought so many things, mostly them to do with money. I've got something that I bought 6 cars in one day, or I've just bought a house that's worth $3 million, and I supposed to have bought a restaurant in Los Angeles for $300,000. Constantly amazes me.
I guess that probably comes about with the news, which was a big story, at least here in the United States, about you holding the record for, I guess it was making the most money as a recording artist last year in the history of people who made records. Some incredible figure.
Well, I don't really know if that's true. It might be. I probably made a lot of money, but I don't know if it's true. I don't know who actually sort of prints that. We never put out a statement to that effect. I think if we did, we'd be silly, because you don't exactly put out statements encouraging tax people, do you? So I just think it was just someone made it up. But I mean, I really have no idea how much money I did make last year.
Is it a burden to make enormous amounts of money? Like you mentioned tax people, that obviously is a hassle.
Well,
is having a lot of, I mean, I know it's everybody's, at least in the Western world, I guess everybody's dream is having, being able to jump into a big barrel of money and just having untold wealth. Do problems come along with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, always problems with money. I mean, people wanting to know you, people working for you start ripping you off. It is. If you got a lot of money, then it's just there's a lot of complications. I honestly don't know how much money I've got. I know how much money I should have, but I don't know how much money. I've got trustworthy people around me. But I mean, by the time the tax is paid, I don't know how much money is left. I don't really care. It's never really bothered me for a long time now. I mean, when I initially came over and I started getting like $1,000 a concert, and then it used to go up to 10. It was up to $10,000 within 6 months. Yeah, I mean, that was exciting because it was like sort of like an achievement. But from that point onwards, it doesn't really bother me that much. It's just nice to have. I've got this great reputation for being the world's biggest spender, and I don't think I am, really. It's just that when everybody mentions money, they think of me. They don't think that Bob Dylan might go out and buy something or something, because everybody does spend money. It's just that they always pick on me.
Does that bother you at all?
Not now. I'm used to it.
Does it change your own values, your own priorities? Are the things that were once important to you the things that are still important to you, or?
Yeah, my record collection. I still collect. Yeah, I mean, I think you go through periods of being stupid with money. I mean, I love cars. You know, and at one point I sort of used to buy one a week and things like that, which was actually stupid. It was just like all my fantasies, I suppose, carrying it out, and then I just suddenly thought, oh, this is ridiculous, you know. So I think as you get older, he said, groaning at 29, you tend to get a little, you know. I mean, I used to go in New York, for example. I used to come here and I used to go out shopping every day and just buy for the sake of buying. I think it's because I never had that much money in my hand before. But I don't do that anymore. I think there is a point where money just tends to lose a bit of value. I think peace of mind is far more important than money. That's why I chose to stay in England rather than live in America. Although I have a house in America, which I use when I go to Los Angeles, I still live in England because I had to decide at one point. I had to be honest. I said, well, am I going to stay somewhere where I'm going to be happy, or am I going to spend the rest of my life going around the world, dodging paying taxes, and then spending the good years of my life just dodging paying taxes, which there was no fun, I didn't think, running around the world. I just wanted a stable place to stay in.
And for you, England is a more comfortable place to live than the United States?
Yeah, for me, yeah. And I wouldn't like to live in America all the time. And I don't like living in England all the time. I mean, I like to get... the great thing about the amount of money I earn is that I can suddenly say, well, I'm going to go to Canada tomorrow, I'm going to go to Red China or something, whatever I want to do. And with England, but England's a nice base. It's a concrete base for me. It has my friends are all there, my relations, my house, my pets, and you do need a base, I think. And I think England's a pretty good base. And these stories about taxation things, don't you believe half the things you hear? I mean, you pay 50% tax in America. I think the most tax I pay in England is 68%, which is still a lot, but it's only 18%. And I'd rather pay 18% more tax and have peace of mind than sort of be miserable and just spend it somewhere where I didn't want to live anyway.
I read something which said that you, of all people, understand stardom for the public fantasy. I think what this writer was saying was that there is some need that all of us as human beings have to put somebody way up high, whether it's the stars of the 30s, or even, I just thought of this yesterday also, the Queen of England is in New York right now. And there was a tremendous outpouring of people, New Yorkers, just to look at the Queen on Lexington Avenue as she went shopping in Bloomingdale's or whatever. And I was thinking that the Queen, in a sense, is, or our president or whatever, it's all like pop stars in a sense. That we seem to have this need of looking at people who, after all, are only other human beings, only other people, and making them larger than life. And somebody said that you understand the need for that, and your image as an entertainer feeds and not, I don't know if feeds is the right word, but goes along with that, and that's why people love you so much.
I think my image is sort of, as, how can I say it? It's sort of an out of the, I don't know, it's a one-off image in rock and roll. I don't sort of, I'm everything that a rock and roll star isn't supposed to be, as far as I'm not the best looking person in the world, etc., etc. I think a lot of people identify with me as sort of, well, if he can do it, then I might be able to. It's true. I think a lot of people do think like that. And I always encourage that sort of thing. Anyway, because I always believe that if you have got enough ambition, no matter what you look like, no matter what you sound like, you can make it anyway if you've got enough ambition. And I am ambitious. I mean, I'm an ambitious person. But I mean, when I was given the sort of key of the city of Philadelphia the other day, and I met the mayor, and it makes me, that really frightened me. I thought, oh my God, I'm so. This is the big thing. I mean, this is the big thing, politics, and you could feel everything was very huge in the mayor's office, and the pop star bit doesn't really mean anything. I mean, the real feelings of frightening things that I've gotten are sort of been with political people, and you sort of become a bit overawed, and politics is very big and very frightening. It makes me feel like a very small goldfish, because that is the real power trip, politics.
Does it hold any fascination for you?
No way.
Elton John in politics, that in itself is a frightening notion.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be you've got to be, I think you must be slightly insane to want to become president of the United States.
Some people would think that about, you've got to be slightly insane to want to be a rock and roll star.
No, not if you, no. I mean, far more people would probably want to be a rock and roll star than want to be president of the United States.
I'm sure.
I'm just living out my fantasies as a child.
Is that why you got into kind of the whole trip of costumes and the glasses and the outrageousness of Elton John on stage? This larger-than-life figure.
Well, it's a big myth, all this, you see, because I was doing this when I came over to the Troubadour, and it suddenly just didn't come because I sold a few records. We came over to the Troubadour, and everybody thought I was going to be like Randy Newman, with probably on a Valium or something. God, imagine that. And I wasn't. I mean, I stood on the piano, played. I wore these ridiculous. I was wearing jeans then, but I was wearing Mr. Freedom flying boots and things like that. And I've always been starred T-shirts and things which hadn't appeared in the States. I've always sort of dressed like that. And I came over, stood on top of the piano, and played rock and roll. And this bit about me, well, once he started selling records, he turned commercial and started wearing silly clothes and everything. Well, I'd always done it anyway. I'd always sort of tried to have a sense of humour about the stage setup, because I don't know, it's part of me. I think there's a very humorous side to music too. It's sort of like vaudeville.
The absurdity of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 100% behind my music, and I love playing music on stage, and I want it to be the best possible. But I've been to so many concerts where people are so into their music that it's downright boring and sort of self-indulgent. And I have to communicate with an audience. I just cannot sit there and not say one word or involve them. I have to do it. And the clothes thing is a myth. I've been doing that for ages. And the glasses thing was just... I suddenly thought, well... I was really fed up with wearing those square glasses. I thought I must get some more glasses, and that sort of evolved from there. From then, I think I helped in creating a sort of glasses revolution in a way, because sure. Everybody can sort of wear. Well, it's there are no limits to it. I hate rules. So they say you cannot wear this, you cannot do this, you can't wear those glasses. Or there are no rules in life. Only the ones you should try and get away from rules and things like that.
Well, I think you've answered one question, that even though you, of anybody making records, in my opinion, probably appeal to the broadest kind of people, from Las Vegas lounge people to Fillmore, Winterland, Madison Square Garden, whatever. But you consider yourself a rock and roller.
No, I always have done.
You've had the opportunity of meeting a lot of very legendary figures. Just a few come to mind that for some reason or other I have the impression that you've got to know, and I would like to ask you about them maybe. Like Groucho Marx, who's somebody that I hold in great esteem, and you've had an opportunity to be with Groucho.
Yeah, several times. Incredible man. Very funny, very frightening to meet the first time, because you can't tell whether he's being serious or not. And first time I met him was at Malibu. I had a house rented there. It was all the pictures on the Don't Shoot Me album were done there. And we got someone to bring him over for dinner, and we knew that he liked to be warm, so we had this fire on. It was like 90 degrees out. We had the logs on the fire. We found out what he liked to eat, and I was just petrified of him, because everyone said, well, he can be a bit funny and then just walk out the door. You know? So he came, and his first words to me was, when do we eat? When do we eat? And he was wearing a beret and an overcoat. And
carrying a cigar.
Yeah. And it was very uncomfortable for the first hour and a half. And then he just completely loosened up. And
was he aware of you? Does he listen to rock and roll?
No, he didn't know who the hell I was. He still doesn't really. I mean, he thinks I should be called John Elton. In fact, he sent me a poster saying to John Elton from Marx Groucho. You can never figure out why I'm Elton. He doesn't really know who I am. I think he's much more aware now than he was then, but at the time he didn't have any idea. But he was really sweet, and once he loosened up, he's a very, very funny man. What can you do in situations like that? You just sit back and listen, because you can't really contribute. All you want to hear is this man talking and telling jokes and talking about the films. And it's like Mae Westwood. I met her a couple of times, and you don't say anything. It's like having an audience with someone who's legendary. I mean, there are several people I regret that I haven't met, like Noel Coward and people like that. People you always hear great stories about, and I'm sure they were very, very amusing people.
How about Katharine Hepburn?
Oh yeah, she's another incredible. I mean, just total unbelievable. I've never met anybody like her ever. She just totally takes control. I mean, you meet her within 5 minutes, she's got your whole room redone out, and she's moved the furniture. And
enormous energy.
Yeah, and you don't even think of answering back or anything, because she just takes over an amazing energy. For that, I mean, she's 60 whatever. She did double flips off my swimming pool diving board. Incredible. I mean, really amazing lady. She can leave you absolutely breathless within 5 minutes. You just can't get a word in edgeway. Amazing.
And I guess most of the Beatles are people that you have now. You've worked with John on record, and you know all of them.
I know. Yeah, John for me is the magic one. I know Ringo. I'm very friendly with Ringo, but creatively, I love Paul's stuff, some of Paul's stuff. But for me, John is my favourite as a person, as a human being. I think he's incredible. He'll talk to anybody. That's what I admire about him. He'll just talk. If you came in this room now, he doesn't care who anybody is. He'll just strike up a conversation, which is not an easy thing to do. If I walked into a room, I would tend to go into my shell. But he's very open, and he's been through, I think, most things that anybody can go through, and he's come out on the other side of it all so well and so nice. He's got a sort of public image that it's so different to actually how he is. It's like Billie Jean King has this public image of being so aggressive, but actually she is aggressive, but she's nicely aggressive, and she's just a superhuman being, and so is John. So when we just started doing Lucy in the Sky, and John was knocked out when he heard about it, and when I did Whatever Gets You Through the Night, that session, I invited him up to Caribou and said, listen, will you play on it? So he said, yeah. And he ended up by playing on it, Dr. Winston O'Boogie. It was just like, I just wanted to do, because I love his songs, and we did One Day at a Time on the B-side. I just wanted to do a couple of his things.
What are your feelings about all of this baloney about a Beatle revival?
I think it's a hideous idea. And whoever started the rumours really done well, because like the Beatles albums have all got back in the charts. And he had 8 singles in the charts in England in the top 30.
It's happening now in the United States.
Yeah, and with the even the White Albums in the top 50, I think, or something. So I think it was probably put about by someone on the Paul McCartney camp before the Wings took. No, things like that happen. But I just think it would be it's just not on. I can't see it. If it ever did come about, I would be the most surprised person in the world. I would hate it if it came about as well.
The thing is, it seems to me that there's some people who have to stretch back because they're not as excited about rock and roll now as they might have been in the late 60s. What do you think about the state of rock and roll in 1976?
I don't think it's that bad. I think there are a lot of good music. I think there's a lot of good music around. A lot of people that have waited their turn are starting to really sell records that are good. I mean, there's some great albums around. I don't think it's that bad. I think there's always in in show business a sort of urge for people to come back that have been out of the limelight. It's like when Sinatra sort of retired. I mean, there's always, wouldn't it be great if the Beatles got back together again? But I think it's people that never actually had the chance of seeing them live, you know, on stage together. And in fact, you know, they only did 20 minutes, doesn't even enter their heads, you know. I think there's just a great nostalgic thing towards that, and that's why the McCartney tour did so well, because people hadn't, I mean, it couldn't fail anyway, but people were doubly interested to see him over here because they hadn't seen him playing live on stage since the Beatles. And that's why I wanted to see the concert over here, because it's sort of like the reaction is so much better than in England, because he's done tours of England anyway. I think it's it would be a very sad thing if the Beatles got back together again and played live, because I know that they just couldn't do it.
How about if they made an album, though? They didn't play live, but worked on an album together.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, yeah. I wouldn't say that's beyond the realms of impossibility.
I find that an interesting thing.
Yeah, I would rather have an album than have a concert.
I agree. How about reggae? You think that's a vital force in music these days?
No. There are selected reggae things throughout the years that I've liked. Desmond Dekker and Toots and the Maytals, a couple of things. Singles, more or less, than albums. But an album of reggae just drives me around just up the wall. But the Bob Marley is an exception. The Live at the Lyceum album is fantastic. But no, it's okay.
You once described yourself as being the John Denver of rock and roll. What did you mean by that?
It's going back to the personality thing, probably the housewife situation. I have this cutesy image, you know, with most people off stage, so in the audience, and that's what John Denver has. So it's something I'm landed with. That's all I could compare myself to. The John Denver of rock and roll. In fact, when I was going through the airport in Los Angeles the other day, these four bouffon ladies said, "My God, it's John Denver." I couldn't believe it. I had these huge white glasses on, and I thought, God.
There seems to be a great kind of search going on, at least in the United States, for deeper meanings in life, and people running, identifying with this guru and that guru, and higher consciousness, and whatever you want to call it. I don't know what this, you know, what the rush to nirvana is all about, but
that's the Indian restaurant up the road,
on top of the plaza. What do you have any feelings about that? Do you find any emptiness in your own life, or any need for some kind of spiritual search or religion or?
No, I've always sort of been fairly open-minded about religion. I'm not anti-religion whatsoever. I'm not a religious person. I think there are times that you do feel low in spirits, and I think that's when friends will come to the rescue a lot. And if you have really good close friends, I think most people who have like 5 or 6 really good close friends in matters of crisis, you would help them out and they would help you out. And everybody goes through the depressing things, and I think if you've got a good friend, I always found that it helps me out a bit. This is the land of the psychiatrist. I don't think I'd ever actually go to a psychiatrist, because I think, well, if I can't really sort my own problems out, and my friends can't help me sort them out, then I don't want to know. But it's probably a very staid old English view. I don't know. That's my opinion.
Okay. Thanks, Elton.